You ask me why I serve the Lord. Is it just for heaven's gain, or to walk mighty streets of gold, or just to hear the angels sing, or just to drink from the fountain that never shall run dry, or just to live forever and ever in the sweet, sweet by and by. If there were never any streets of gold, neither a land where we'll never grow old, it's been worth having the Lord in my life. Living in a world of darkness, He came along and brought me to light. But if heaven never was promised to me, neither God's promise to live eternally, it's been worth having the Lord in my life. Living in a world of darkness, He came along and brought me to light. He's been my closest friend down through the years, and when I cry, you know, He dries every one of my tears. It's been worth having the Lord in my life. Living in a world of darkness, He came along and brought me the light. But if heaven never was promised to me, neither God's promise to live eternally, it's been worth having the Lord in my life. Living in a world of darkness, He came along and brought me the light. I was living in a world of darkness, He came along and brought me the light. Luke chapter 21, and I'm going to read verse 6. And as for these things which you're looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down. They are beholding the temple. They are just cheering on one another. Look at this massive temple. It is such a statement to the Jewish people. It's also an homage to Solomon. It is our temple. Look at it. It's just amazing. And Jesus is standing there with them, and that's His remark. He says, there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down. Of course, they didn't understand how He could say that. And they questioned Him, saying, Teacher, when therefore will these things be, and what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? And He said, see to it that you be not misled, for many will come in my name, saying, I am He, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. I wonder if we'll be the more gullible. When we hear those that say, I am He, follow me, we're going to hear all kinds of things. We're hearing them even today. But Jesus says, don't go after them. Verse 9, and when you hear of wars and disturbances, do not be terrified. Well, these things must take place first, but the end does not follow immediately. I've mentioned to you how we felt the night when we engaged the war in the Persian Gulf. I don't know where you were that night, but Brenda and I were in Mobile, Alabama, at a Carmen concert, and there was just a hush over the 10,000-seat auditorium when Carmen stopped for a moment and said, ladies and gentlemen, we need to pray. We have just launched attacks in, where was that? Thank you. What would I do without you, Miss Google? You're amazing. But it was almost like, boom, the rapture's truly got to take place right after this. Verse 10, then He continued by saying, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes, and in various places, plagues, famines. There'll be terrors and great signs from heaven. Great signs from heaven. Just a couple of weeks ago, the director of the state's Institute for Internal Studies, actually study for international studies in North Korea. He's a government official, and he writes this. It's published, of course, by the state-run news agency, North Korea. And this is what North Korea says. The United States nature, the U.S. nature, as man-killers, has become all the more undisguised with the passage of time. As leopard never changes its spots, the brutal nature of the U.S. can never change. The nuclear weapons were the foremost strength that helped the U.S. lord it over the world for a long time. And he goes on to stress that nuclear weapons are no longer the monopoly of the U.S. He says it will clearly realize before long what is precipitating its doom. This is the absolute fate of the U.S., the empire of evil has to face. This was written just 2 weeks ago from a North Korean government official. And so, why our young protest in the streets and destroy Confederate statues, I don't know how many have been pulled down. I think I read somewhere this week that there were schedules in 38 cities to pull down statues or to build special museums or cemeteries for these Confederate statues. So while our young protest in the streets, and it is quite an amazing thing, and I know that you've been watching it in the news, North Korean children today, in fact every day, in state-run schools attend national nuclear indoctrination classes. They've been deemed by Western press as Doom 101. Every day in North Korean schools, they are taught about nuclear fallout, and they're taught about impending nuclear war, not just with the West. They're taught about nuclear war with the United States. They're taught about the end of the world as they know it. You know, North Korea is just a little tiny country. I think I read somewhere this past week that they have one submarine. I may be wrong, but I read that from a reputable source. It was on the internet, so it's got to be good. And we think sometimes of the Korean conflict that it did not end with a as you'd call a victory for the United States. It ended by a treaty, a ceasefire, and Korea is preparing, and they are willing to go to the end. And so they're teaching their kids to prepare for the end of the world. Wow. Seventh-day Adventists, you've heard of them. They predicted the end of the world would happen in 1874. Now, I could have gone way back, and I could have given you quite a diatribe on all of the predictions of the world's end. They are myriad from the first century, even before Christ, the prediction of the end of the world. But in a more contemporary sense, 1874, the leaders of the Seventh-day Adventists predicted that the world would end. But a student of Thomas Barber, who had published the prediction for the Seventh-day Adventist, a student who had been a big fan of Barber, would come back and make his own predictions. By the way, the world did not end in 1874. Just wanted to give you notice of that. And so he said, well, okay, the world didn't end in 1874, but 1874, Barber said, was actually when Jesus commenced his invisible presence in the earth. 1874. and that the rapture would commence in 1878. Well, one of those students of Barber, the Adventist, his name was Charles Russell. Charles Russell formed a group that he would deem Jehovah's Witnesses. And so he pronounced that the world would end in 1914. In fact, many of them went to a particular high place on the western side of Texas to view the rapture of the church in the year 1914. And Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower, they would post Russell and his successor, James Rutherford. In fact, they would make a boatload of predictions of the end of the world and what they deemed to be the rapture of the church. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses don't do that as much anymore because modern-day leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses realize that not one of their prognostications has come true. Not one of their dates has been anywhere remotely close of their predictions or prophecies. But here's what Watchtower published in 1918 in an article they deemed The Finished Mystery. Here's what they said. Also, in the year 1918, when God destroys the churches wholesale and the church members by millions, it shall be, any that escape shall come to the works of Pastor Russell to learn the meaning of the downfall of Christianity. Aren't you glad that 1918 came and went? And as far as I know, nobody ran to the Jehovah's Witnesses to find out what happened to the church. Do you remember in 1997, just as I was at home one night watching the television? Fox has got this thing now, and I wish they wouldn't do it, but it always says, Fox Alert. It's like crying wolf all the time, and there's nothing really happening. But back in this day, 1997, when it came on the news, it was important. It was really something. It was very newsy. 39 members of a cult called Heaven's Gate. They were found by a tip-off of somebody that went by this house, and it was a hilltop mansion in Del Mar, California. There was nobody in the house alive. In fact, there were 39 cult members, all dressed in black, all dressed in, they made sure they were all dressed in matching Nike tracksuits and Nike shoes, and they had all died of suicide, vodka and sedatives, and they all had plastic bags around their heads, as if that didn't work, that they would suffocate each other. And they did so in corps. It was learned that some of them would help some of them die, and then Group C would help Group B die. And I'm not sure how Group C pulled it off by themselves, but they did. And they all were found with a purple cloth over their heads. They all had their hands to the sides of their beds, but they also all had their bags packed meticulously neat besides their bed, and in every one of their pockets was a $5 bill and a handful of quarters. Because they were planning to rendezvous with a UFO that at that particular time was to be over their heads behind the Hale-Bopp comet. And they were going to meet him there. I know you scratch your head and you roll your eyes. Monday, the United States is going to experience what's called the Great American Eclipse. The Great American Eclipse is total solar eclipse. The moon will pass between the earth and the sun, and it's apparently going to be pretty fascinating to watch. This hasn't happened in 38 years. They say that it will last, depending on where you are, it will last about 2.5 minutes. It's estimated that 100 million people will see it. 100 million people. It's funny. I don't have any of those little glasses yet. I don't know if I'm going to get any of these glasses or if I'm just going to go the colander route. Somebody said if you can't get glasses, just get the colander out from under the sink and look, put it over your head and look through one of the holes. So I will be that guy, Angela, out on the lawn with a colander over his head, looking through one of the holes. Send pictures. No. Pastor and Wilma are, in fact, in South Carolina, where it is predicted to go right over the top where they are. It's being projected by many that this will be the event of a lifetime. Can you imagine? The event of a lifetime is going to happen Monday at about 1 o'clock. The event of a lifetime. I want to say, what a great day for the end of the world. Would you agree? What a great day. Why, there's heightened anticipation. While the news cameras are rolling, while people are traveling to get perfect vista, I think even in Tallahassee we can go to, climbing, downtown Tallahassee. There's a viewing place, and I think you get free glasses if you want to go there and watch. I mean, what a great time for the Lord to come again. What a great time for the catching away of believing saints. And that's when we read the scriptures in Luke chapter 21, verse 6 to 11. These scriptures that you and I have already read were believed to have transpired and have already happened, had been fulfilled in the year AD 70. Some 30 years or so after Jesus Christ died, after he ascended into heaven. Remember, it was Jesus who said, look at this while you can, because there will not be one stone to turn upon another. And they were just aghast. How could this happen? If any of you have seen the Western Wall, which is all that's left of the Jewish temple, those boulders are massive. They are massive boulders. And yet, in AD 70, the Roman government overran Israel, overran Jerusalem, and destroyed the temple. So this is taking place. Now we look together at Luke chapter 21. You're there still in Luke 21, but look at verse 25, where the Bible says this, "And there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth dismay upon nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and waves, men fainting from fear, in the expectation of the things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Oh, it's a great time for the Lord to come back. You may hear in my voice, and I really don't want you to. I'm not being facetious at all. I'm just saying, hey, this would be a great time for God to just surprise everybody while they're looking at an eclipse, for Luke 21 to absolutely come about. Let me tell you, the cameras are going to be rolling when millions of people are miraculously caught away, if you believe in a concept of the rapture of the church, which talks about in the twinkling of an eye, people who believe in Jesus Christ will literally be called off of this earth. It's just hard to imagine, but we believe it to be true. Hey, tomorrow at 1 o'clock would be just a great time for that to happen. I assume Brenda and I will go up together, and I also am hopeful that we will meet our kids. I'm not sure how that's all going to happen. Somehow we got to meet up in the clouds from Daphne, Alabama. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but I'm kind of excited about it when I think about this rapture. And I think, well, hey, tomorrow would be a great, great time for this to happen. With almost a Y2K veracity. Where were you on the eve of Y2K? Think about it. On the eve of Y2K, for months before the night when the calendar went from 1999 to 2000. It was an interesting time, frankly, to pastor. In Daphne, Alabama, oh yeah, we hosted symposiums for the community. We had the fire department come out. We had the Center for Emergency Response come out. We had a whole symposium up on the platform talking about what could happen on the night that we go from 1999 to 2000. It was a wild time when you think about it. And also, we all hope that would be a great time for the end of the world to happen, or at least for the rapture of the church. And where were you in September of 1988? In September of 1988, Brenda and I were on staff at the Great First Assembly in Asheboro, North Carolina. And the book, actually it wasn't a book, it was just a little pamphlet. It was called 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Come in September 1988. Where were you when this book came out? We couldn't give enough of these books out. I mean, people were reading them. People were coming to the church asking if we had them. I don't know where we got them or how we would have gotten them. It wasn't that we promoted it. It was just that was the news of the day. And it's amazing how we saw church attendance spike. And we saw people coming in, particularly on the day before. On the day before, people were coming in, I'm not kidding you, wanting to talk to a pastor because they wanted to make sure they were ready to go. And I prayed the prayer, at least 2 or 3 fellows who came into the church office wanting to talk to a pastor because the next day the Lord was to come. Many are projecting the rapture maybe tomorrow at 1 o'clock or some kind of judgment. And while our country is distracted as it is by the racial and great political unrest that we're seeing every day, this past week the governor of Oregon signed into law an expansion of abortion rights, which gives to an expectant mother now the legal right to abort her fetus from 0 to 9 months. Just this past week, our liberal news media, when they weren't covering or bashing Trump or protests and the like, the media was almost giddy about what Iceland is doing. Iceland declared this past week an end to Down syndrome. Well, it was great news. Could you imagine finding a cure for Down syndrome? And it would come from Iceland. But it wasn't a medical breakthrough. In fact, it wasn't even a scientific discovery. Iceland has decided that the government of Iceland will fund a pre-birth test to determine if a mother is carrying a Down syndrome child. And if she's carrying a Down syndrome child, the government will fund her abortion, and the country of Iceland will in effect eradicate Down syndrome by aborting Down syndrome babies. Do you know anybody that has Down syndrome children? I do too. My home church, there was a family in our church. They were foster parents for, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 special needs kids, and several of them were Down syndrome. And they were so much fun. Remember Tony, Brenda? Tony was so full of personality. Oh, he might have been 28 years old. There was another one of them that loved to play the violin. He loved to play the violin, and so we let him play with us on Sunday mornings. My drums, my cousin on bass guitar, and our little band pit was over there, and he loved to come over there and play his violin, but he only played one string. He played one string, and all service long, it sounded like a bunch of bees over there, attacking bees. Could you imagine? But he was so happy, and we would tell him, Roger, that's awesome, man, that's great. And he would just go, boo, 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 boo. But he was so happy. And we were happy just watching him happy. But could you imagine a government saying that if you have a Down syndrome child, we know you don't want that child, so we're going to abort that baby while it's in your belly. People in America will fight for puppies and whales, but will be silent about abortion. And here's all I want to propose to you. God surely sees this. Some, like the voices in history's past, would attest, and maybe you would join me in this room today and say, you know, there's something in the air. There's something in the air. If nothing else, an eclipse and the calamity in our world today at least causes us to give pause to the eternal and to the bigger picture, I trust. Many are fascinated by this eclipse. Some are amazed that the eclipse is going to enter into the continental United States, way out yonder in Oregon of all places, and that it's going to come in and about Salem, Oregon. And that the path of the eclipse would go across at least 7 cities named Salem. Well, so it's not to give new attention to witchcraft of the 17th century America, but it's to give attention to the Hebrew word Salem or Salom or Shalom or Jerusalem. And again, to give attention to the city of God, Mount Zion, the Word of God. And many are really excited about this. Some are saying that this eclipse is God's way of saying that I'm just ticked with the mess that you've made of this world, that He's angry. He's watching evil. He's watching the iniquity in the United States and certainly in the world. Some are saying that God is angry because He saw the transfer of billions of dollars. Pallet loads of $100 bills. Pallet loads in 3 U.S. aircraft flown into Tehran, Iran. You heard about it. What was it, maybe a year ago? Which today finances the Iranian Navy in the Atlantic and off the coast of Israel in the Mediterranean. Some are saying, boy, God's really ticked with that our United States government would send billions of dollars of American money to Tehran, Iran, and is now funding further hatred of Jerusalem. Some are saying, boy, God is ticked because Trump said that he was going to move the United States Embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. And that was going to be a great, great statement. I wish, frankly, that he would. But for some reason, there's been delay. And the embassy hasn't been moved. And there's no talk today about the embassy of the United States being moved to the ancient capital of Israel in Jerusalem. And some are saying that, hey, God is mad about that. And this eclipse is just a way to get our attention. I'm with you. I wondered in September 1988, could this be it? I wondered it. I wondered in Y2K, the eve of the year 2000, could this be it? I wondered it. I was wondering at that time, had I been a good pastor, had I prepared people, had I talked to them about the dramatic catching away of believing saints? Could this be a sign? Could this be a message that churches like ours are considering all over the world today? Could judgment, some kind of judgment, be just hours away? How would that affect our lives? How would it affect the 50 or so people that could be in church here today that are not, for whatever reason, if we thought judgment was just an hour or so away? How would that affect the way you and I would live? In our America, anything goes today. How many of you would agree with me? Anything goes. Anything goes. Since it's just me, I remember with my little boys one time driving, taking Chad to school, hearing a commercial from a local gym, a radio commercial, and the gym was talking about this supplement, and the commercial was at 7:25 in the morning, how this supplement not only made you men more able to perform in the gym, but it made you more sexually virile. And I remember driving down the road with my son in the front seat thinking, I'm taking this kid to, 2nd or 3rd grade. And I got so offended by that at that time of the day. And what are you? So I called the radio station. And apparently a whole lot of people in Mobile, Alabama, called the radio station. And you know what? They pulled that off the air. They made apologies about it. And I appreciated that very, very much. But today, anything goes. Anything goes. Now, it's just not commercials about feminine products. And if you notice, any commercials today is going to highlight the American family which now it might be a man and a woman, and in between them a little baby. But today, no, it might be a woman and a woman, and in between them a little baby. Or a man and a man. If I was a betting man, I'd say, go home and I bet you this afternoon before you close your eyes, you will see the new cultural norm. Anything goes today. Anything goes. And in fact, any of us that don't go with your anything goes concept, we're bigots. And so anything goes. The cross today is despised. Christianity in particular is repressed. It's persecuted. I am a chaplain with hospice, and it's only been just a couple of years ago that even in corporate world of hospice that they have relegated hospice chaplains to not praying sectarian prayers with hospice staff. So it just kind of blows you away that you can't even pray in the name of Jesus in organizations like that. Civility in politics in the public square. Well, what civility we're talking about? Civil disorder at the drop of the hat. We watched yesterday in Boston. Apparently, it was a pretty good day because there was only 28 people arrested. Many no longer feel safe in their own country, and they certainly don't feel safe in our own homes. And I want to say, what a great time for a cataclysmic event. What a great time for the rapture of the church. I direct you to the scriptures in Matthew 24, verse 37. Matthew 24, 37 says, "And as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Now, if nothing else, I'm glad that this event in our history is bringing our attention back to Matthew 24, 37. But don't you wonder, well, what is Jesus exactly alluding to when he says the days of Noah? Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. "And the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." Oh, those scriptures are ancient. And yet they've never been more relevant as they are today. A time when heroes and deliverers are seemingly downplayed. Ronald Reagan's not in the White House. Our hope in a morally renewed government is being greatly challenged. But I want to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, if you, like me, thought that your hope was in the government, and just a godly voice or two in the government, you and I know that our hope is sadly misplaced. Government's never going to be able to do that. So a question I pose to you this morning is simply this: where then do we go, Pastor? This probably won't be the last time we have an event like this. Where were you after 9/11? My church was full for several weeks after that, after 9/11. It was the saddest time in history. It was an exciting time in the church. People were hearing the gospel. People were getting their lives straight. People realized that life really was unpredictable. And I'm asking my church family today, where do we go then when all we hear is the sky is falling? Where do we go? What do we do as believers in Jesus Christ? Now, as I prepare to send you home, I want to send you home with this one word. Pastor, where do we go? What do we do? What is our posture in a day like today? Church family, we still go to God. The Bible says the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous run into it and are saved. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We do not know what's going to happen in America. We don't know whether our president is going to be booted out of office. We don't know if Michael Pence is going to lead some kind of revolt and take over the White House. We don't know if Maxine Waters is going to somehow be the president on Tuesday. We don't have a clue. Heaven forbid, we all said. we don't really know what's going to happen. All we know is how God would have us to live. That's all we know. How God would have us to move. How He would have us to respond. This is what the Bible says in Jeremiah chapter 29. He reminds us on a day like today, and to my church family, I hope none of us are wringing our hands in despair. Brenda and I said just the other day, with our kids living down the mouth of Mobile Bay, we always got bad weather there in Mobile. And any kind of hurricane in the Gulf always comes up through Mobile. I remember Brenda and I talking, boy, maybe we need to get them a generator or something like that to be prepared. That's a good word, ladies and gentlemen. You just walk and live prepared. The word says in Jeremiah 29, it says, I know the thoughts that I have for you. I know the plans that I have for you. They're good ones, good ones, good ones. Now that doesn't mean, ladies and gentlemen, that as judgment may well be exacted over the unrighteous, it doesn't necessarily mean that you and I will be unscathed and unaffected by the judgment of a land or a people group. But the answer to the question, well, Pastor, what do we do tomorrow at 1 o'clock? I would that ye all go to the Dairy Queen for a nice blizzard. In other words, we're going to look to God. We're going to look to God. We're going to depend on God. We're going to celebrate His Word. We're going to rehearse what He says in His Word. We're going to rehearse His great character, His loving character. And we're going to totally put our trust in God. And this is what we have to give to our families. And this is what we have to give to our country. Whatever North Korea does, or whether the Jehovah's Witnesses come up with another date and time, you and I are going to hold steady. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, rejoice in the Lord always.